I am MD, and this is the Fourth Branch Project. We are currently discussing the topics of the Trump-Russia collusion with the Mueller's investigation. This morning we started talking about how a simple mistake by Robert Mueller threatened to derail the whole investigation. Now, it is a tragedy for the country that an investigation that has been conducted in the most professional manner could be derailed by a very simple mistake that the man, Robert Mueller, who is considered as someone who makes no mistake, who is very calculated, now could manage to derail the investigation he has put so much time to do. Donald Trump, since the beginning of the investigation, has had a very simple answer to every aspect of the investigation by repeating, there is no collusion, there is no collusion. Now, in order to understand exactly how a simple mistake by Robert Mueller could help to derail the investigation, much more than Donald Trump attorneys and now the quacks such as Giuliani and Jay Sekulow could ever manage to do. Now, to get you a little bit of understanding as to how that could happen, we have to take a look at the detail as to how it all started, where we are in the process. This morning, we covered part one of the program. Again, this program is not here to debate whether the people who voted for Donald Trump or the people who didn't vote for Donald Trump. We are not here to debate either as to all the evidence that's presented that show that Donald Trump has indeed collaborated with the Russian. In fact, a lot of documents, including even his own words, clearly suggest that he has colluded with an enemy state. We are not here either to discuss the strategies that his attorneys, prior to the two quacks that he currently has today, referring to Giuliani and Jay Sekulow, in terms of the PR campaign that they running in the hope that they can sway public opinion as if this is what's gonna save Donald Trump. Now, despite all that has happened, and there are a number of witnesses that have already testified. There are, even as of date, we have learned that Don McGahn, who is Donald Trump attorney, had been collaborating with, or cooperating rather, with special counsel and to detail everything that he knows in terms of what has happened during the time he was doing counsel for Donald Trump, more specifically for the office of the presidency. Now, despite all that's been going on, despite everything that seems to threaten the very existence of Donald Trump presidency, and those details are indeed very damning, because it's not just one specific detail, and it's not just one specific individual that's providing corroborating evidence, that providing proof, that's talking on record about what has happened. Now, if you are a Donald Trump supporter, you may hate the idea that all those things are coming to show that indeed Donald Trump has collaborated with an enemy state. Now, just in parentheses, I should say that even if you are a Donald Trump supporter, if you were to be an American first, that should be something that's of importance to you, of concern to you, that the person you voted for who sit in the Oval Office actually doesn't care about the country he's running. Instead, he's doing everything that helping to destroy the country. So that just in parentheses, that people should start, whether you're a Trump-Republican or you are a Democrat or an independent, it should be the primary concern that whoever sits in the Oval Office is abiding by the oath that that individual took. And remember, on January 20th, 2017, Donald Trump took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and one of the clauses say his primary job is to defend the republic against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And as it stands today, with the evidence that's coming on a daily basis, on a regular basis, it is becoming extremely clear. It is becoming so obvious that it's undeniable that Donald Trump has indeed collaborated with Russia. Now, this is no longer the defense. If you remember, when this investigation first started, the defense was, we have nothing to do with Russia. That's how the whole process started. Now, as information were trickling in, and it started becoming obvious that tapes started to emerge, videos starting to emerge, then the defense started to change to, oh yes, we may have collaborated with other people, but it was nothing really serious. And later on, it becomes very clear that there was a meeting between the members of the Trump team and some Russian. And the conversation or the defense becomes, well, we were just talking about adoption. And so on and so forth, until it gets to the point where there is no way out of those type of defense. Now, the only thing that you start hearing as a defense from the Trump team is, well, collusion is not a crime. Now, if you are an idiot, all that I just mentioned would simply be okay that the same people that been putting a defense as there was nothing there, well, maybe there was something, it was nothing, and so on and so forth. Now, it start moving the post to today, from there was nothing to today, well, it happened, but it's not a crime. Now, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that this is not normal, this is not acceptable, especially bring it back again. This is with a foreign adversary. We're not talking about someone here in the country. We're not talking about an opposition, a political opposition. We're talking about a state, a foreign government who happen to be the United States #1 enemy. So having said all that, then it is undeniable that there has been collaboration between the Donald Trump team and the Russian. That proof alone is sufficient for Robert Mueller to issue, to file a report that clearly shows that Donald Trump team, and information we may not have today, but Donald Trump team, and most likely Donald Trump himself. Remember, I wrote quite a few articles where I mentioned that at no point in Donald Trump's life that anybody who works for Donald Trump would ever take the responsibility, would ever take a step to do anything without Donald Trump knowledge, without Donald Trump approval. So it would be the 1 in a million aspect of his life where something was done without his knowledge, without his approval. I'm referring to the fact that a number of people in his team managed to collaborate with Russia, managed to ask for information about his opponent, Hillary Clinton, and Trump would know absolutely nothing about that. Now, if that were to be the case, and that's really the point, if that were to be the case, that would be the first time in Donald Trump's life that would have happened, because it has never happened in private life. And now, as President of the United States, anything that happened, anything that has anything to do with Donald Trump, he has to know about it and he has to approve it. So it is almost impossible to imagine that this, what we're talking about, happened and Donald Trump was not aware of it. Now, which means it's damning information. And on top of that, we have already on file, publicly displayed by Donald Trump, that he has managed to obstruct justice. So he has taken a number of steps, and just recently it's proven again that anybody that can provide information that's detrimental to him, and by detrimental I don't mean information that people manage to create. We referring to information that's there, information that digged, information that's known by certain individual, and they can pass that to the special counsel. So anybody that's in that position, Donald Trump try as best as possible either to shut the person up, to buy the person up, or to simply try to minimize that individual importance. In other words, Donald Trump has also obstructed justice. So there are two major crimes that already publicly in display. Those are not speculation. They're right there in front of us. They in court paper filing by the special counsel. They right there in front of us while Donald Trump is doing whatever he's doing to prevent the investigation from moving forward. So those are facts that we are witnessing that the President of the United States is engaged in. Now, after it's now no longer possible to argue against the idea that his team has collaborated with an enemy state, because that argument is out of the window. There is no more room to move and make a defense, because all the time that we've been talking about it, they've been moving the post that there was no Russian, there was no collusion, there was nothing happening, until it becomes impossible to use that argument. Because today, we know for a fact, and Donald Trump actually mentioned it, proved it, not only through his attorneys, but he also mentioned it that his son, Don Jr., he refers to in his ranting tweet storm, his son, his lovely son, did take a meeting, but there was nothing to it, and besides, collusion is not a crime. So this is now what the defense is, which means we know today that Donald Trump has collaborated with the Russian. So there is no if and but. No matter where you stand, no matter who you approve, no matter who you support, we know and you know that Donald Trump has collaborated with Russia. Now, we could have taken a step back and say, well, if the President of the United States has collaborated with an enemy state, that's enough for anybody who is an American patriot to say, well, the hell with that individual. Because how could you be the President of the United States and you took an oath of office and your job is to protect the country, but instead you are the individual who is collaborating with an enemy? That should have been enough. But unfortunately, we do have a Trump-Republicans party that simply could not care less about the country, because to them, the United States is not important for them. So this is where we at. Donald Trump has committed crime. This is no longer a speculation. It's right on the surface. We know that Donald Trump has committed a crime. He has colluded with an enemy state, Russia. And we also know that Donald Trump has obstructed justice, and we have a list of that. Of course, we all sitting waiting for the final report. Of course we are, because everybody relies on the special counsel to provide that report, and those people who are on the Trump side now are hoping that special counsel Robert Mueller would provide a report that cleared Donald Trump. Breaking news, it's not going to happen. Donald Trump is already publicly shown, proved to everybody in the country that he has committed a crime. Now, having said all that, now how in the world that a mistake that Robert Mueller has made, and it's a very simple mistake, it's a human mistake that Robert Mueller has made, and that's what threatening to derail the whole investigation. So if it were for Donald Trump, he's toast. That's done. There is nothing else. The report will simply show more of what I just mentioned, which means I only know as much as Donald Trump has put in front of us, in front of the audience, in front of the public. That's as much as we know today, that his team has colluded with Russia. That much we know. There is no argument there. We've seen it. We have proof of it. We also have proof that Donald Trump obstructed justice, and he continued to do that on a regular basis. So there is no if and but about that. The only thing we're expecting from the special counsel is to have now a mountain of evidence. That's all we're expecting. But those two items that I just mentioned are enough. We don't need a mountain of evidence. Donald Trump already provided the evidence that clearly suggests that he is no longer fit to sit in the Oval Office. Now, has the legislative branch tasked to put a check on the executive branch, was doing the job for which it exists, today there would be no need for special counsel Mueller report, because this is on display for everybody to see. Now, despite all these things that happen, despite this public crime that Donald Trump committed, there is still that slight possibility that the mistake that's made by Robert Mueller could derail the whole investigation. Shortly after Donald Trump was sworn in as the 45th president of the United States, then Attorney General Sally Yates went to the White House to warn the Trump administration that his national security advisor at that time, Mike Flynn, was compromised. Mike Flynn was compromised because not only he went to Russia to give some kind of presentation, but he was being paid for some other aspect of his collaboration with Russia. Not only Sally went to the White House to provide that information, but she also provided proof to the new administration, detail of the compromise. And drum roll, she cited Russia as being the topic of that compromise. The Trump administration completely ignored the warning. It's only after news report, Washington Post, New York Times, etc., published that Mike Flynn could be compromised, and stated that the Trump administration ignored the warning, only at that time that finally, reluctantly, that Trump decided to cut ties with Mike Flynn. Now, if you remember very clearly that even though Trump let go of Mike Flynn, and some story was concocted as if they didn't know anything about what really was going on with Mike Flynn. And remember, I just mentioned earlier that Sally Yates, at the day a day or two after Trump moving into the Oval Office, the first thing the then acting Attorney General Sally Yates did is she went to the White House to let them know about that information. They ignored it. But when the report came out, the words out, White House press briefing, that they knew nothing about those things. In fact, they say if only they knew that Mike Flynn was lying to the vice president, and so on and so forth. So the story after story, that's really what was going on in the Trump administration. Now, FBI being now in possession of the information about Flynn, which is the job of the agency, is to investigate so that they could dig further what was going on. Now, this is a normal course, a normal process in the Department of Justice, that some sort of activities, foreign activities, a public official is compromised, then the current administration is advised of that so that they can take steps to protect the administration, and mainly, which means the person who is compromised would definitely have to be removed. But FBI job doesn't stop there, because once Sally Yates warned the administration, of course, now the document, the papers, all the information were passed to FBI to investigate further as to what that compromise was. Mike Flynn is out reluctantly, but day in, day out, Trump continue to say out loud on Twitter, during interviews at rallies, that Mike Flynn is a good guy, Mike Flynn is a good guy, and so on and so forth. But it didn't just stop there, and that was going to be the first proof of obstruction of justice. Mike Flynn is let go, although the argument White House provided, or the defense White House provided, was that they didn't know. And yet the president was almost literally lamenting over losing Mike Flynn. So by all account, he didn't really want Mike Flynn to go. He wanted Mike Flynn to stay in his administration, but pressure made certain that that was taken care of. But he didn't just stop there talking about it. Now, he went to FBI. At that time, James Comey was FBI director. He went to the FBI director and said, to kind of wrap up that investigation, because well, just let that go, because there is nothing really there. So do me a favor, just wrap that up. So of course, James Comey, FBI director, cannot just take the president's word, because the job of the FBI is not to please the president. The job of the FBI is to investigate crimes and make certain that whoever is responsible, whether it's an American or foreign government, now that's become clear and evident to everybody, and the current administration would be made aware of that, and at which point the current administration would take steps, whatever those steps are, because FBI job is not to go after Russia, but rather to pass that information to the administration, the current administration, or whatever that is, Democrat or Republican, and the administration would take what would be called political steps in order to curb the problem. So FBI Director James Comey continued to do whatever FBI was supposed to do, mainly to continue the investigation into Flynn's interaction with Russia. Now, strike number one. Trump dispatched at that time Reince Priebus, who was the chief of staff, to James Comey office not once but twice to tell James Comey, well, rather the word is to encourage James Comey to just wrap up that investigation, put an end to that investigation. That's strike number one, obstruction of justice. Mike Flynn is let go. Department of Justice consider him as someone who may be compromised by Russia, United States number one enemy. Now, a president who just took an oath of office to protect the country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, here it is, proof in hand by the Department of Justice telling him, Mr. President, we have a problem. Now, instead of providing resources and support, what did Mr. Trump do? He sent his chief of staff to FBI director to say to the FBI director, can you please let that go? That's obstruction of justice number one. Now, I'm not sure what James Comey said to Reince Priebus, but it was pretty obvious James Comey didn't go along with whatever Reince Priebus asked him to. So after a meeting, that's a few weeks later, after a meeting at the White House, Donald Trump took James Comey aside, kicked everybody in the room out, including at that time the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. After the meeting, kicked everybody out, took James Comey on the side, according to the memo that James Comey had created immediately after that meeting with Trump. And Trump told him that, well, Mike Flynn is a good guy. Can you please just let that go? But the word that Trump used, can you see to it that you can let that go? That's strike number two, obstruction of justice. So that was the third time, because Reince Priebus went to the office twice. Now, third time happened at the White House, where Donald Trump himself, not sending someone, but Donald Trump himself, took the FBI director on the side, kicked the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, out of the room, which is unacceptable because the Attorney General is, in a hierarchy perspective, is responsible for what FBI does. Now, kick the Attorney General out, which, by the way, he should have not accepted to leave, because this is his job. If the President of the United States is going to be talking to the FBI director, the Attorney General cannot be out of the room. And Jeff Sessions should have pushed back. He didn't. Regardless, Trump took James Comey on the side and said, Mr. Comey, can you please see your way to letting the Flynn investigation go? Strike number three. So we can all assume that obviously Mr. Comey may have not done any such thing, because a few days later Mr. Trump himself called James Comey office. Once, according to the report, James Comey didn't pick up the phone, and he simply left a message for James Comey to call him back, which James Comey did not do, and he called again. Now think about that for a moment. The President of the United States is the most powerful person in the country, right? Now, usually, I would say pretty much, unless it's a personal call, unless it's something personal, the President of the United States would not be dialing the office of the FBI. That's almost unheard of. It's not going to happen. He would have been in a room with whoever, his advisor, chief of staff, his attorney general would have been in the room, and they would have had a phone on speaker where the FBI director would have been called, and everybody would have been there in the room with the president of the United States talking to the FBI director. That would have been the process. Now imagine that now Donald Trump get to a point where he is in hiding in the Oval Office, probably talking very low, trying to talk to the FBI director because he wants him to do something that he knows is not acceptable for the president to do. It's called obstruction of justice. Why in the world Donald Trump wanted so much the FBI director to stop the Flynn investigation? It doesn't matter how close Donald Trump were to be with Mike Flynn, but as President of the United States, you have been given the information that that person, the security advisor that you had, is compromised with the United States #1 enemy. And that didn't ring any bell that, my God, this is the person that would be giving me advice, and that person is actually compromised by the country #1 enemy. But instead, that's not the way that Donald Trump saw the whole thing. And he saw it differently because it was pretty obvious that there is something about Mike Flynn that clearly say that Flynn was not the only individual who was compromised. Because if you think about it, I hire you as my security advisor and you happen to be compromised, then, well, it's something that should have been divulged before that person was even hired. Well, it wasn't. Whatever the reason was, it wasn't. Nobody caught it. But now we have that information. Then that should have been the end of my relationship with that person. But that's not what happened. Donald Trump wanted to keep Mike Flynn close despite the fact he's fired. He no longer can work for him. And the reason was not because Mike Flynn was the godfather of any of his kids, not because Mike Flynn used to go golfing with him, not because Mike Flynn came from a different cloth, from the armed forces, from the security aspect of the country. Donald Trump was never in any of that. So their relationship is not that strong of a relationship until, of course, the election, when Mike Flynn decided, after being stripped of his position in the Obama administration, decided to go and promote Donald Trump campaign. So the relationship is not that close. The relationship is not that strong. But there is something that binds those two men together. If you guess it's Russia, you are absolutely a great psychic, because that's the only thing that binds those two guys together. Mike Flynn's in Russia, compromise, and Donald Trump compromised with Russia. And if you want to take an educated guess, you would say that Mike Flynn knows things that Donald Trump would not want him to pass to FBI. And that would explain the reason he was so interested in the FBI director letting the Mike Flynn investigation go. That's obstruction of justice. Now, after that phone call, it's obvious that James Comey still didn't pay any attention to Donald Trump. And that's why when Donald Trump sit down, and I'm very certain what I'm about to tell you, that he didn't talk to anybody about it, because had he talked to someone about what he had in mind, they probably would have told him that you cannot do that. But then again, he probably did, and they probably told him that. But he went ahead anyway and fire James Comey. Because in his limited ability to think, he reasoned that if I fire James Comey, then all investigations are over, right? That was Donald Trump. You know how limited he is in his way of thinking. Donald Trump always thinks he's smart. Donald Trump is a genius in marketing. That everybody can give him that, because he seems to have that knack for PR. Now, where did he get that? I'm not certain. But in terms of everything else in Donald Trump's life, he is really he has a very small brain when it comes to smart, to knowledge, to understanding. Because in his mind, he concocted that rosy picture that James Comey is currently the FBI director. I fired James Comey, I put somebody else, case closed, Mike Flynn is in the clear, so am I. And I said, in his very limited mind, because anybody with knowledge would have known that to have fired James Comey would not stop the investigation. Because James Comey, yes, was FBI director, but when an investigation is being conducted, there is a group of people that are who are responsible to conduct that investigation, and different people touch that aspect of the investigation. And of course, still in his limited mind, he thinks, I fired James Comey, I put somebody else, and I tell the person what to do, what not to do, and case closed. And Donald Trump doesn't seem to know the government doesn't work the same way as his private business. It doesn't work that way. Yes, he would hire the FBI director. He hired a lot of people, and he can fire them. But the Department of Justice is not Donald Trump's legal team. That's not what that department is for. It's not to defend Donald Trump. The Department of Justice is to serve the Donald Trump, the presidency of the United States, whoever that is, whether it's Donald Trump or anybody else. And on top of that is to ensure security of the country. So hire and fire, hire someone, fire someone. Anyone who has a certain decency, or anyone who doesn't want to get himself or herself compromised, would never listen to Donald Trump when it comes to investigation about individuals who are embroiled in scandal, embroiled in interference or in connection or collaboration with a foreign government. So it doesn't matter what Donald Trump does, because the Department of Justice doesn't belong to Donald Trump. The Department of Justice helps the presidency of the country, the office of the presidency. And that doesn't mean Donald Trump, it means the presidency. As long as that serves the presidency, Donald Trump or whoever sits in the Oval Office, that's what the Department of Justice does. So the Department of Justice cannot be used as an extended arm to do cover up. So that was strike number 4. So Donald Trump fired James Comey, and he didn't even have the decency to call the guy and say, no matter what lie that he used, but the guy was in the West Coast at a branch office, and he's finding out on TV that he no longer works for the agency. What a piece of work. So thinking that getting rid of the FBI director would make everything go away. It's like going to sleep, you're in a dream, you're having a nightmare, and you're hoping or praying that once you wake up, nightmare is over. But it so happened, Donald Trump, by having this limited ability to think and to think logically, rationally, fired James Comey and created a whole different set of problem for himself. Now it becomes even worse. A special counsel was born. So fire James Comey because we know, I don't want that investigation to be going on. I am the commander-in-chief. So I said stop the investigation. He should have stopped it. It doesn't work that way. So fire James Comey, special counsel was brought in, and now it makes things even 100 times worse for Donald Trump, because it could have just been, my friend is investigated, find out that he was compromised with Russia and he suffered some consequences, and there is a possibility or even maybe a chance that nothing else would have happened. But after committing obstruction of justice, a special counsel is appointed. Yes, the special counsel was appointed to investigate the extent of Russia interference in the 2016 election, and also to find out the impact that had in the election. That was the very task that the special counsel was given. But anybody in law enforcement knows that you are investigating, even people in investigative journalism know that when you are investigating or researching a particular topic, there is endless possibility that you can uncover things that you didn't even have in the back of your mind, you didn't even think about. Sometimes it's during the process of investigating a specific aspect of a topic that a journalist end up actually having a report on something completely different, something they didn't even have in mind, they didn't even set out to do, something that actually not even in the same line of the topic that the journalist was investigating. Same thing with law enforcement. You are investigating something and then you saying, my gosh, I didn't see all that. Then now the investigation has to expand. Now, what Trump is upset about is the fact that the investigation that the special counsel was appointed for is to find out Russia meddling into the Trump, with the Trump team, into the 2016 election, to find the extent, the damage. But during the process of doing that, Mr. Mueller has uncovered so many things that seems to be as bad as Russia meddling in the investigation. And that's what Trump is mad about, because he knows the minute that this investigation begins, they're going to find out about everything he has done wrong in his life, not just during the campaign, not just while he's president, but all his life. Everything that he has done bad in his life will be uncovered, because investigating Russia is pretty much has a very straight line into Donald Trump's world. Now, what the argument is at this point, well, at least from Donald Trump perspective, is this is not what the special counsel was tasked for. It's almost like someone saying that someone is a police officer is called in to investigate about a robbery, but it so happened that next door there is a dead body lying there that get stabbed or shot, and the argument of the individual that the officer is talking to, it could have been just for a drug issue, and the person's argument is, well, you cannot really be investigating the murder because you're not here for the murder, you're here to investigate a drug issue. That's really what the argument Donald Trump is trying to bring. That, yes, I know that I have committed a lot of crimes. I know that the body is in the next room. But you're not tasked to do that, Mr. Mueller. You're only tasked to find out about meddling in the election. There is no collusion. Well, there is no law enforcement who would simply turn his head the other way when he stumbled on a crime while investigating another crime. No law enforcement would ever do that. So Donald Trump committed a crime, obstruction of justice, by forcing the issue, trying to get first his chief of staff to stop Comey from investigating Mike Flynn. After chief of staff tried and failed, Donald Trump intervened himself to say, Mr. Comey, please just let that go. Mr. Comey ignored him, and to make sure that he was being ignored and know that's what was happening, he called James Comey office twice. And when he felt and when he sensed that James Comey is not going to do what he has, he figured the only way to put an end to that investigation was to fire James Comey. Now, if you're smart, you have to ask the question, why? Why was Trump so gung-ho about protecting Mike Flynn? He's not family. He doesn't go play golf with Trump. He was just a security advisor who happened to have been fired from his job. Why did the president of the United States spend so much time trying to defend Mike Flynn to the point of committing obstruction of justice? Ask yourself that question. Why? So Mike Flynn must have something that Donald Trump doesn't want him to say, because nobody does that. Because I am fairly certain that his attorneys would have advised him not to get involved in that aspect of the investigation, because let the FBI conduct the investigation on Mike Flynn and stay away from it. I'm certain that his attorney would not have mentioned that to him. But he would not let it go. He would not leave it alone, because there is something that Mike Flynn knows that Donald Trump does not want to come out. Those information are damning information. And no matter how much you turn the table, no matter how much you twist yourself to try to explain away those events that keep mounting as evidence against what Trump has done, both in terms of collaborating with an enemy state and obstructing justice, there is no way around it. You can put a wing on a pig, the pig will never fly. The pig cannot fly, too heavy, never fly before in his life. So no matter how much you twist the lie, there is too much evidence that being collected, and those evidence are being corroborated not just by an individual, by many individuals. So it's one thing that someone say that Donald Trump did, or Donald Trump said, Donald Trump asked me to. It's one thing. But when you have 3, 5, 10 people from different aspects of in their life, in the organization, in the administration, at different time, being able to corroborate, not sitting together, not sitting in the same room, but it's someone that comes. We'll take the case of Papadopoulos, the coffee boy, who comes and say that caught red-handed talking about the fact that there is dirt, the Trump administration is looking for dirt on Hillary. Sitting at a bar in London, talking in front of the ambassador, one of the ambassador of Australia that happened to be at the bar, listening to him talking. Now, this is just one individual. Then, of course, if you remember the story, automatically when that story came out, well, Papadopoulos, he didn't really have any kind of function in the organization, in the administration. He was just a coffee boy. But this is just one individual passing that piece of information. And then you have a second one, and a third one, and a fourth one, up to the point where you even have the president's son, Don Jr., receiving an email from one of those Russians saying that we have some dirt on Hillary, and for him to answer, if that's the case, I love it. So there is no way out of the situation. I wrote an article about that very thing. Donald Trump is trapped. He's boxed in. No matter how much you see him kicking, it's almost like if you find a very savage, a beast that's on the brink of death, trying as best as possible to kick, or maybe the last kick before death. And that's where Donald Trump is at. He is at a point where no matter how much he kicks, the hammer will be falling on him. But as if it is by some miracle, Robert Mueller made a terrible mistake. Actually, it's a simple mistake. It's not a huge mistake. It's a human mistake that Robert Mueller has made. Now, at any point in time, if taking the same mistake Robert Mueller made under a different set of scenarios, it would have been something that, it would have been negligible. It would have been something that nobody would even notice or talk about. But because Robert Mueller is the special counsel in charge of investigating the collusion between the Trump team and Russia, any mistakes that's made, no matter how small, is amplified. And Robert Mueller has made a mistake that currently threatening to derail the very investigation he has so meticulously worked towards finding not only the culprits, those who were involved in meddling in our internal affairs, but also looking to find out who else, especially here in America, in the Trump team, who may have collaborated, who may have provided support, in order for them to accomplish their nefarious work on our democracy. Now, Robert Mueller could become the biggest savior that Trump was not looking for. Because today, lies, repeated lies, obstruction of justice, collaboration with the enemies, cover up by the Trump administration, cover up by those in Congress, cover up by, especially we have the three musketeers, Devin Nunes, Jim Jordan, and Mark Meadows. Those are the three musketeers who should be ashamed of themselves to even be part of the House Intelligence Committee. This is really a joke that three individuals, one of whom is the chairman, Devin Nunes, and what he has been doing. Now, it would have been a good thing for him to realize that he cannot be that person and just resign from that post. But instead, he used that post. Devin Nunes, Jim Jordan, and Mark Meadows. They're not the only three, but they are the three musketeers who are at the helm of helping Trump cover up for the collaboration with Russia. And what even worse is the fact that they all three belong to the House Intelligence Committee. That's what's even more unnerving, to have members of Congress. They're not doing that in hiding. In plain sight, they are doing that. Now, there are others like Trey Gowdy who is trying. People think of him as, since he's a former prosecutor, they think of him as someone who is so smart. That's why you see during hearing at the Hill that a lot of Republicans usually tend to let him use their time so that he can make an argument against whoever they're trying to pin. If you watch Peter Strzok at the Hill, then you would remember that Trey Gowdy, a lot of Republicans just give their time to him so that he could go after Peter. So all those Republicans, members of the House Intelligence Committee, what a joke. What a joke that is for the United States of America. Members of the House Intelligence Committee, who is the House Intelligence Committee is a subcommittee of Congress whose primary task is to investigate anything that could be construed as threat to national security. They hold public hearing so that the public can know what's going on. But classified, sensitive, top secret information are usually discussed in closed meeting, so the public would not know that. Now, those are the members of the House Intelligence Committee: Devin Nunes, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, you have Trey Gowdy, you have a bunch of others, but those are the people at the helm that are making the decision publicly to cover up for the President of the United States, who are obviously collaborating with an enemy. Remember Helsinki, where the President of the United States, the same enemy we're talking about today, the same one who meddled in our 2016 election, the same enemy, Donald Trump, was in a room with that individual for 2 hours. And that individual happened to be a former KGB agent. And Donald Trump is an idiot. Now, consider what exactly could happen. You have an idiot of a president sitting in the same room with a former KGB agent who happens to have made a name for himself, not just in Russia, but across the world. Now you have an idiot sitting across that person. Now, if you don't think Donald Trump is an idiot, watch the conference and see how much of an idiot he was in Helsinki, Finland. So if he could have that kind of performance publicly with the world watching, now consider what happened behind closed door for 2 hours. And yet, despite all that I just said, despite the possibility, despite the evidence that Donald Trump is obviously in bed with a foreign government, despite that fact, it looks like Christmas may come early for Donald Trump, because Robert Mueller has made a mistake, and that mistake can cost the investigation. Not only derail the investigation, but everybody that has been dragged in front of the special counsel may find themselves in a situation where they, on that simple technicality, walks away free of charge. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. Don't go anywhere. The Fourth Branch program will return in just a moment. Join me here on the Fourth Branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday.
Welcome back, and you are on the fourth branch program, the first and only program which is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for the determination for a more perfect union. We are talking about the Trump-Russia collusion investigation by Robert Mueller, and we have been talking mostly about the various mistakes or crime, I should say, that the Trump administration has committed. But the very gist of this program today is mostly to bring out the fact that while Trump has already provided to Robert Mueller the tool necessary, the evidence necessary to move forward with an indictment if necessary, but there is a possibility that Donald Trump may walk away free of charge because of a simple mistake that Robert Mueller has committed. And that is absolutely necessary to discuss in great detail in order for you to get an understanding as to all the initiative that Donald Trump has been taking to derail the investigation were mostly useless. There was no reason whatsoever for him to have done any of that, or maybe it's because he has done some of that. That's why at this point Robert Mueller has made a mistake that could eventually put an end to the whole investigation. Now, would the Department of Justice let that happen? Would the Democrat let that happen? Now, it depends. If it happened before the election and the Republicans are still in power, it's almost evident that they're going to clap, they're going to love it. Trump Republicans going to take to the street and celebrate. There would be smile on Trump's face. But if it happened after the election, what would the Democrats do? What could the Democrat do? Hold just a second. We'll be right back. Now, baby, you're casting your spell on me. I say, now, baby, you're casting your spell on me. My baby's cast his spells on me. The performance in Helsinki was enough to drop Donald Trump's support to zero. Because anybody who is a patriot, an American patriot, should not have any reason whatsoever to still stand behind the president, the first person whose primary job is to elevate the country, but did just the opposite, nobody should have been behind that person. And yet, we have Republicans who still defending, arguing their support for Donald Trump. Seriously? Really? What the hell? Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday.
I'm telling you, Michael Jordan himself was right here in my McDonald's. I fixed him the very first McJordan special. Right, Bill? I did. I took a quarter-pound of pure beef, smoked bacon, cheese, and some of my favorite barbecue sauce, and I named it the McJordan Special.
Bill, the sandwich, definitely great.
Yeah, but you got the cooling with that story. But it's true.
How you doing, Bill?
Hi, Michael. Michael.
The McJordan Special for a limited...
Wayfair, let me show you how I do my thing. Check. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that. Wayfair it all. Here we go now. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that. Wayfair my this, Wayfair my that.
Don't just shop for your home. Wayfair your home. Find everything you need and more at wayfair.com today.
Hello again. The 4th Branch Project is a program that is aired every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. And occasionally during the week, we have a special program, and we usually try to send an announcement a few minutes prior to the program. And this program is catered to individuals who are patriots, individuals who are more concerned about the country than they are concerned about their political party. So it is extremely important to work towards a more perfect union. But the only way, or one of the ways that can happen, is by eradicating ignorance. Ignorance is one of the biggest obstacles which prevent a perfect union from being achieved. So we started the 4th Branch Project in the hope that we can partake a little bit of knowledge in social political issues, and that would at the very least start or trigger a conversation that can help achieve a more perfect union. I thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time.